Hey, folks. Lots going on this week, and Jen, I'm almost gonna throw the floor to you immediately, with the exception of just a programming note. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody! Long weekend. We will be taking Monday off, so we'll be back on Tuesday with more stuff to come. But Jen, I think the ball's in your court right now. The big news at the end of this week is your home province
Big
has a
news in
well, or will
Alberta.
have a new premier.
Yeah, so firstly, the only thing that was surprising about Danielle Smith's win was that it actually came on the sixth ballot. I think that generally speaking, most of us expected her to win on the first. We expected to sort of a Pierre Poilievre-like victory. I now am wondering whether or not that just was a reflection of maybe mass buying of party memberships by people like on the NDP and on the left to try and keep her out. I don't know because I don't know how to say this, but like everyone else just totally fizzled out of this leadership race 3 months ago. Like Taves really hasn't been in the running for 6 to 8 weeks. Jean has been nowhere. Like there's just been no one else with any momentum. So I kind of am wondering if there was an organized anti-Danielle campaign among non-conservatives, which wouldn't have necessarily have been caught, which might explain why she was sixth ballot. I don't know. That's purely conjecture on my part. Point being, Danielle Smith won. We expected her to win. The general consensus in the Twitterverse now is that now, of course, it's a Rachel Notley shoe-in.
Yep.
Danielle Smith is just way too Looney Tunes to succeed at this. She's got so much history. She's got so much oppo against her that there's just like the UCP has, as our contributor today put it very succinctly, the UCP has strapped itself into a plane and yelled the kamikaze curse as it's about to commit suicide. I'm not sure I 100% agree with Ken. I get where he's coming from, but let's also remember, he worked for Rajan Sani, who was one of the leadership contenders who ran against Smith. So I think he's kind of coming at this from a very dark perspective. I don't hold a lot of optimism for Smith because her gifts as a politician are also some of her weaknesses. She is a brilliant, very gifted communicator, but she's a fast talker. And she's one of those people who, you can sit here and you can listen to her and you can be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Wait a minute. Slow down. Let's talk. Like, I don't describe this as like she can throw so much information at you and it sounds so good that your brain kind of stops processing it and you stop thinking about it. But it's only when you think about it later that you kind of go, that's not actually how that works. Or did
Yeah,
you think about that?
but most people don't think about it later.
But most people don't think about it, right? And I could
Yeah.
use a couple of examples here, but I don't really want to get into it. The point is that she's a fast talker. She's highly communicative, but she's also, this is her real gift. She's a really good listener. So I followed her for a little bit during the last couple of days of the campaign for a Globe column that I wrote. And what really got me, or what really interested me, is that she went to one group meeting. Basically, what it was, they were taking the ballot boxes to all of these different locations across Alberta in order to collect the physical ballots. So while they were there, they would have the ballots there for a couple of hours. She'd come and give a speech and whatever. So in one of these locations in Carsland, Alberta, which is just outside of Calgary, it's a hamlet of like a couple hundred people. Only 7 people showed up, and rather than have a rally or just get into her stump speech, she sat down with them and she had like an impromptu group therapy session and said, well, tell me what's your problem? Like, what are your issues? And she started writing them all down. Like she was listening to people and taking them seriously. And like, that's very Alberta. That is very Alberta. And also that is exactly what the UCP caucus had wanted from Kenny. And Kenny never gave it to him because he never understood that that's what they were looking for. They were looking for the classic Ralph Klein style approach to leadership, where the door was always open and anyone could come and talk to the leader at any time about their issues. She's almost like a facilitating group. As I said, it felt like group therapy. So
Can you
if
see the
she can
weird
take,
look I'm giving you?
yeah,
Can I step in and just Toronto explain something for a second and pop your
go for it.
bubble?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Want to know a weird thing Albertans do?
Yeah.
They take stuff that's banal and usual and declare it very Alberta.
Oh, do we? Okay. Is
Why?
that
Like,
normal?
that's Doug Ford.
Well, yeah, and this is the comparison I
this is Justin Trudeau.
This is yes, and
like this is not an Alberta thing. This
sorry,
is
okay, I
the
apologize.
Premier of Ontario and the Prime Minister from Quebec.
But this is why the analogy to Doug Ford is so apt, and this is what I kind of thought was ironic about the Corey Tenike quote that was in Ken Bosenko's piece from where he makes this point where he's like, Danielle Smith is radically different from other conservatives like Doug Ford, and I'm like, maybe that's true. Maybe she'll turn out to be radically different like Doug Ford, or maybe she'll turn out to be just like Doug Ford. You know, so I remember when Doug Ford was elected, people were like, he's a Trumpian populist who's gonna blah 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 blah. What for Doug Ford's many failures, he didn't turn out to be that.
No.
So I kind of think that there might be a little bit of a like the Doug Ford Danielle Smith analogy might could prove to be more apt than people are giving it credit for. If she can actually sit down, talk to people, and be realistic about what her goals and ambitions are, and communicate those goals and ambitions to ordinary people, and if she can keep her caucus together, if the macroeconomic factors continue to go her way, and if the next 6 months don't turn into just an absolute tire fire of crazy, she might be able to pull this off. Now, or she'll find out that Premier of Alberta is a poison chalice, and this province is effing crazy, and she will not be able to manage an already deeply divided caucus. She'll try to bring in some crazy version of the Sovereignty Act. Her own caucus will split and turn against her. Her failure to pass the Sovereignty Act will totally alienate all these people who got on board for her because of it. Or she does pass the Sovereignty Act and people realize that it's absolutely stupid, symbolic nonsense that doesn't actually work because that system doesn't work the way she's claiming it does. In which case, the whole thing goes full tire fire, and we wind up with another NDP win, and like the next 9 months of my life are glorious because like it's really easy for me to find stuff to write about. I don't know which way this is going to go, is what I'm saying. It's like I am open to the possibility that like this coming race may be a lot tighter than people appreciate. It's going to be totally fascinating. The next 9 months of Alberta are going to be amazing. It's also possible that like she brings in the Sovereignty Act and this becomes a precursor to an actual separation movement, and like a bunch of investment in people just go, you know, F off. Nope, not in for this. I'm going into the sea. Like, you know, which would also be crazy. So like, man, anything could happen. It's Alberta. It's so weird.
But isn't sovereignty support for Alberta like 15% ish?
No, it was at high. It was 30.
But like, is that the normal range, or is that everybody was grumpy?
It's up. It's yeah, that would be the high. It's still in like the 20-something% range. Like it's not small. Let's put it that way.
Taking in all your wisdom here, I have two things. First of all, again, I just want to reiterate to not only you but all our Alberta listeners here, like not everything that happens in Alberta is a really Albertan thing. Sometimes they're just things that people do. It's like, you know, I had eggs for breakfast this morning.
That's fair.
Like Albertans.
The only thing I would say is like Ralph Klein set a precedent for how Alberta politicians expect their leadership to sort of run itself. And politicians and premiers who haven't followed that model have struggled. Premiers who've tried a very top-down hierarchical type leadership style don't do very well in Alberta.
Yeah.
But maybe, and I think that there is a cultural element to that, to the political culture. I'm not saying that like no other leaders in Canada keep the door open and listen to their MPs. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are specific expectations that are sort of ingrained and baked into the political culture of Alberta. And people who are coming from places like, say Ottawa, you know, Kenny or Prentice or Redford, or, you know, people who aren't really baked into that culture, they don't get it. They just come in the door and they're like, okay, I'm the boss and you're going to do what I say. And that really alienates them among the caucus. So I think there's an element of political culture there.
I don't want to make this an anti-Alberta podcast because I think, you know, by Ontario standards, I'm actually really freaking Albertan. Like a lot of my politics would align quite well with Alberta stuff. Sure. And Alberta is one of my favorite provinces. But I remember I told you before that Albertan conservatives in particular have drunk too much of their own Kool-Aid, and they're actually not that conservative. Like they're
Oh no, they're not conservative at all.
They're curmudgeon-y and grumpy, but like then they hemorrhage money on stuff.
No. Alberta
And
conservatives aren't conservative at all.
I just
I
think
mean,
Albertans have a really interesting view of Alberta.
yeah,
Um,
and also a massively self-inflated, self-important view of Alberta, which absolutely clouds
um,
their judgment on stuff.
this might be that. I don't think it's self-importance there, but it's a
Oh, the
sort of,
separation stuff totally is.
yeah, no, probably. Yeah, maybe on that front, but I just think like part of Alberta's culture is to be in love with Alberta in a way that is like endearing, but
Yes.
also like, only in Alberta do we love our children. I adopted a puppy like an Albertan
Well, in
does.
Alberta, we don't have rats, so that
Yeah,
that counts for something.
yeah, it counts for not having rats. And I think the self-importance you're referring to might stem a little bit from the fact that people who are from Alberta seem to be convinced that anywhere that is not Alberta, like all life is this like Hobbesian miserable state. And then it's like, our politicians, they talk to the voters. It was such an Albertan thing
Oh,
to
I'm not talking
do.
about talking to the voters. I'm literally talking about talking to caucus.
No, yeah, but I don't know. I mean,
I
the other
get where you're
point,
coming. I get what you're saying. I get what you're coming from. But like like I said, I think there is a.
we have blue skies in
I've written
Alberta.
about this for about how Alberta conservatives aren't actually conservative. They're
No, but
not,
they think they are.
but they
And
think they are, and
like
that's what's so funny.
this is a self-identity thing.
I
Like
know it is.
Albertans have guzzled too much Albertan Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it's
Again, I
true.
say this as a guy who likes Alberta. Like I
Yeah,
really, really like Alberta.
yeah.
But I just like with love from Toronto, like I'm just kind of bemused by your self-absorption sometimes, because it's like,
It's intense. But
yeah.
then you're so fascinated by us when we do crazy shit, like elect Danielle
Um,
Smith as premier. Like,
well, probably you would need, yeah. No, I mean Alberta
right?
is one of the
The
more
self
interesting
absorption
provinces.
is rooted in the fact that you are all like gaping at us with wide eyes whenever we do anything. It's
Yeah, but
funny.
it's horror. Um,
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, horror is attention, man.
the other point I would make, and I'm look, I'm not the expert in Alberta politics here. You are. I defer to you on this stuff. But a lot of what you're describing to me strikes familiar chords and notes of
Hmm.
just this person cannot possibly win because the people on Twitter don't like them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like I know that you and I make a habit of repeating on a fairly regular basis some of the stats on this. Like not that many Canadians are active on a daily basis on Twitter. A lot of the ones that are not involved in politics. A lot of the ones that are only loosely involved. Like it's such a tiny little slice. Like
Yeah.
there are issues in Alberta or in any province that, well, I mean, look, I'm just, you know what? I'm going to scrap what I was about to say. I'm just going to remind people that Doug Ford won 83 seats.
Yep. That's right.
And so the more I see a consensus forming up that Danielle Smith is bad, she's doomed, she has baggage, Rachel Notley is going to mop the floor with her.
Oh, I don't bet that.
It's Hillary
Man, we
Clinton
are.
all over again. It's like, you know
Yep.
what I mean? Like we've
That's
had,
exactly right. Yep.
like, how many times does reality have to show up and slap a big cream pie in our face before we start to realize that we're probably, I was going to be coy again and say our expectations are a problem, but I don't think that's what it is here. I think we're monitoring the wrong inputs.
Yes, you're huffing your own farts is the problem.
Partially. Well, I mean, that's the Alberta thing I was telling you guys a minute ago. I said it more
Yes.
gracefully than that.
Yes.
But what I
No, but
mean
you're right.
is,
The Twitter consensus is not worth listening to.
well, it's sort of like, what are your meaningful indicators? Like when you're trying to understand the world around you, what do you look to? And you and I have talked about this before. I actually think we live in an age where it's very hard to do that. I think, our media, our culture, our society is so kind of distributed into tiny little silos. It's hard to get a sense of how the people feel. But I just don't have the sense that Danielle Smith is going to be as radioactive to the random Albertan as the blue check segment of Alberta Twitter has concluded.
Yeah.
Again,
But
that doesn't mean she doesn't torpedo herself. It doesn't mean that,
yeah.
like, they're like, I'm not making any predictions here. I don't know the scene well enough to make these predictions here, but it's the certainty that she's doomed that I just think is misplaced. Like, have these people learned nothing in recent years? We have lived through stuff that none of these people would have told you was going to happen. And yet they come along and they go, well, Danielle Smith is doomed. And like a bunch of millions of Albertans pat themselves on the back and go, oh, okay, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Now, what I would say on the flip side of all this, and where there are meaningful indicators, is there's so much Oppo in her, man. It's not hard to craft some really effective attack ads on Danielle Smith. There's so, like, she was a former radio host. So
Yeah, we were
there's
colleagues
years
at
and
Global News.
years of stuff that she has said and written. And I mean, as anyone who writes or speaks for a living, so there's just going to be mountains of material of Oppo on her in terms of her stated views. So there's that. And then the other thing I would point out, and Ken did make this point, I think it was apt in his column, she is not talking about the issues that the vast majority of Albertans think is important. The vast majority of Albertans are not foaming at the mouth at Ottawa and secretly planning to live in the Republic of Western Canada. Okay. The vast majority of Albertans are like, my grocery bills are high. Like, it's the same kinds of problems. And I'm concerned about where the healthcare system's at. Like, you know what I mean? It's the same kinds of problems that everyone else in Canada is worried about. So, can she actually use her voice, her platform, her communication skills to actually speak to where the majority of Albertans are? We'll see. But if she goes in on a platform of like free Alberta, that's not gonna fly with the 70-80% of the province.
Yeah, as ever though, I mean, as the Liberals federally have shown, you don't need
No,
more
you don't
than
need
30% of the
70.
people
Yeah,
if you get the right 30% in the
that's
right
right.
places.
That's right. Yeah.
So, all right. Any other? I mean, so I think your dispatch blurb will be largely
Yeah, just
this
going to be
stuff.
like do not rule out the possibility that Danielle Smith is could win. She absolutely could. There's so much unknown here.
On the federal front, we got a few topics here. So one of the big stories this week, and you and I actually talked about this a little bit this before we started rolling because we wanted to kick it around to see if we thought it was worth talking about. Here's what happened. Let's just go straight with the news. Global News reported this week that going as far back as 2018, YouTube videos posted to Pierre Poilievre's account contain metadata hashtags. And for the listeners, don't worry, I'll explain what that means in a minute, that use a misogynist term. Now, for readers and listeners and viewers who don't know what I mean by metadata hashtags, when you are posting an article or a video online, you can add keywords and they're not publicly viewable. These keywords are for the use of search engines. When I was a rookie at the National Post, kind of one of the grunt jobs we would have would be posting copy on the web. So here's an article, it's getting in the paper, go put it online. One of the things we were told to do was add 5 or 10 keywords. So for example, this is way back in my day, but I would be loading an article and it'd be like Canadian politics, Canadian federal politics, Ottawa politics, Stephen Harper, Michael Ignatieff, just stuff like this.
Yeah.
It helps search engines find you.
Yeah.
Now, it has gotten way better since then. I am not conversant in this stuff technically at all, but those are the key terms. One of them, MGOTW, like men going their own.
Men going their own way.
Yeah, MGTOW, you're right. TOW, men going their own way, is a subgroup of men who find feminism so repulsive and modern women so repulsive that they've given up on forming meaningful relationships with women. These are sick puppies. These are not good dudes, right? Like these are twisted people.
Men going their own way, and us women are just like, you go your own way, far away from me. Thank you very much.
Well, Chris Selly, writing the National Post this week, basically said, if not for the fact that we've had incel terrorism, men going their own way would be a huge win. It would be like a despicable segment of the population removing themselves from the gene pool. So Global News got this. And so there's been some immediate debate.
So just so clear, MGTOW was one of the
terms
that was put in Pierre Poilievre's YouTube videos. It was one of the metadata terms.
Yeah, going back as far as 2008.
With the implication that, like, if you're on YouTube and you are falling into the MGTOW type rabbit hole, Poilievre's videos are then going to be more likely to show up in your feed. So you're going
So
to be more likely to watch them.
so the videos I watch would be like Leaf clips, Leaf highlights, Star Trek scene, prog rock music, and YouTube being a data gathering machine starts going, well, this user keeps clicking on all these videos. These are the overlapping terms that those videos share. Therefore, he might also like these other videos that
Yeah.
also have these terms.
It's why
So,
it's why the YouTube algorithm is as good as it is, and it
and
keeps you
it's
addictive. It keeps you
frighteningly
getting
good.
sick. And it sucks you into the rabbit
Yeah.
hole of, because it's constantly figuring out what you like and what you want to watch more.
And it's shockingly good.
Yeah.
So, when I was doing this stuff 10, 15 years ago, it was very crude. Now it's very, very good.
Yep.
And the implication for Pierre Polyev here is that either he or someone in his employ had identified men going their own way, these despicable weirdos, as a target, as like
Yeah, it's a
someone we
target audience.
want to be getting our message to.
Yeah.
And this fits in, I think, with some of the existing narratives around Pierre Polyev, that he courts the extreme, that he has ties to dark stuff. I'm not 100% sold on this. Now, first of all, this is dead to rights. Global has this. The conservatives have acknowledged as much. Polyev has acknowledged as much, and they have removed the terms. So no one's denying this was a thing. What I'm curious about is whether or not there are more banal explanations to this, because this will be portrayed as either Pierre Polyev himself being like, I want to go out and get those weirdos, or being comfortable exploiting those people and realizing that his message would resonate with him. Those would be lines of attack.
The first thing I would also observe is MGTOWs are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of.
They're tiny.
They're not very many of them out there. So this is not exactly like some huge voter base that is going to like swing an election here. You're talking about a couple, maybe in Canada, thousands of people, maybe.
Well, I'll tell you what I did. I went and I talked to a friend of mine who is not political, but he's an SEO guy. He is a search engine optimization guy. Sure. And I said to him, how would something like this happen? My friend, not political. He doesn't give a shit about this stuff. But what he said to me, he goes, look, there's a few ways it could happen. A, Polyev or someone working for him made a conscious, rational decision to go after these guys. That's the explanation he's being accused of, and it's very possible. He also said it's possible that someone was copy and pasting terms from some marketing list they already happen to be on, or
and we should say also as well, like I think, and I don't know about YouTube videos, but it's now it's not just 10 metadata tags you can put on. Now you can put in hundreds of metadata tags. So if you're one of the fastest ways to go about tagging up your data is you copy and paste a giant list of meta tags and just throw them all in there in order to just rig up and just jerry rig your viewer stats.
That's what my friend had said. He says, especially for someone who's recently started posting videos, before you've identified an audience, you pick the top 10 people whose reach you like, and you don't care what the content is, but you're like, I want to get the clicks like this guy and this guy and this guy. You copy all those meta tags and you throw them in.
So
that's
you'd look
possible explanation.
So you'd look at, say, for example, Jordan Peterson's video.
There you go.
Pull up all 120 metadata tags that he has on his video, and you throw it into yours. Yeah.
Now that might sound like a whitewash for Polyev. I honestly don't know if that's happening, but that's a plausible explanation. So here's the thing. We're never going to know what the truth of it is. Because even if they know, they're never going to reveal it.
Yeah, but I mean, let's presume it's the second scenario, because to me that just seems like the most plausible scenario, that they grabbed a Ben Shapiro video or a Jordan Peterson video, and they just grabbed all the meta tag data and threw it into their own video. Let's just assume, I just think that's the most plausible answer. So let's just assume that's what it is. That means that the type of YouTube audience they are looking for is like, say, a Jordan Peterson watcher or a Ben Shapiro type watcher. You know what I mean? Like, that is the pool in which they are swimming. I think that is a fair comment. I think that's a fair story, and I think it's a fair thing to observe. It's not necessarily that MGTOW itself is having one MGTOW tag out of 100,000 metadata tags is itself that incriminating, but I think it does suggest to me that they think that their audience and their growth is in a particular pool of watchers that are kind of in the right-wing kind of YouTube watching sphere.
I think as well, I mean, I agree with you on that. I have sort of three meta conclusions from all of this. First of all, the liberals and those who are opposed to Mr. Poilievre, they're going to run with this. This is too good an opportunity for them.
Sure.
I also suspect, with no disrespect intended to Global News, does this sound like an oppo drop to you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know for a fact. I haven't spoken to the reporter, but a story like this looks to me as an oppo drop.
Of course.
So I'm being a little more conditional with Jen because I hate dealing with lawyers, but it strikes me as possible that Global News might have been handed.
There's nothing wrong with covering oppo drops. We've all covered oppo drops. There's no shame in that.
The other thing that jumps out at me is the possibility that no one's going to care. And
this is so beyond a Twitter story. This is a Twitter I'm sorry.
Possibly.
Pierre Poilievre's YouTube videos included a MGTOW metadata tag. Oh, that'll sway the masses. No, this is totally a Twitter story. I'm sorry. Like we literally just spend 10 minutes explaining what this stuff was.
Yeah, but if I'm a liberal and I'm on the attack, or if I'm a third party proxy and I'm going after Poilievre, you don't need to get lost in the weeds.
No, that's true.
Just go out there and you go, Pierre Poilievre, he hangs out with convoy guys. He advertises to misogynists. I think there's an easy way to sell that narrative.
Yeah.
But I also know how the conservatives are going to sell the narrative, which is, while they're snooping around in our, copy and pasted metadata, we're focused on the issues that I'm a cynic on the number of undecided voters. Like, I think we cover 99% of our news stories in this country as if 99% of voters were open to changing their minds, and I don't think they are.
No.
So the last point that jumps out at me, though, as being actually, okay, sorry. I thought I had said I had 3 meta conclusions. I actually have 4. Another one. This just shows you how powerful these digital tools are. Like, shaping opinion and influence in ways maybe even the people attempting to promote the opinion don't fully appreciate. There are like 5 people in the world who fully understand the implications of these software tools all of us are using. I just find that interesting. Like, at a certain point, these are like ghosts in the machines. Like, I want to throw a hypothetical at you, okay? Totally hypothetical, not even speculating this is the case. Imagine that the MGTOW tag ended up in there because some like 21-year-old nerd who had never kissed a girl and was jacked up on Red Bull and at 3 a.m. coding this website put it in for a giggle so that he could tell his losers in whatever like bulletin board they chat with, hey, guess what I did? I put a tag into Jordan Shapiro's video. It's a misogynist tag. People would be so angry. And then for years after that, marketing guys copy and paste it into a billion different advertising campaigns on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, and we can actually have entire societal movements being shaped around some 21-year-old who hasn't slept in 3 days because he's on a coding binge. We wouldn't know it.
No,
like, we honestly wouldn't know it.
Right.
The last point I'm actually going to make that I think is more substantive is, I thought it was interesting this week to see the liberals hit back, because since Poilievre has become the leader, it's been Poilievre attacking, punching the prime minister in the face. We've already seen the liberals give some ground on some issues like ArriveCAN and the borders. I don't want to say that Poilievre looked rattled in question period this week, but the man with the worst poker face in Canadian federal politics is Andrew Scheer. He looked rattled when the liberals were punching Poilievre in the face here. Andrew Scheer, and I was talking about this back when he was leader, he has zero poker face. He just doesn't. Like, this is Andrew Scheer's expression when anything bad's about to happen. So video watchers got the benefit of that, but podcast listeners didn't.
It was a very good face.
He had Andrew Scheer look, and the look I remember from when he was leader. When Andrew Scheer knows he's about to have a bad 20 minutes, everybody knows he's about to have a bad 20 minutes.
He looks like he's holding in a poop.
Or worse. I mean, I described it to a colleague that the look on Andrew Scheer's face is if you're having a normal conversation with him, and then you slowly hold up a picture of his parents in an intimate act, and he's like, this is really uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to continue answering the question. That's the look on his face. And always has been. So yeah, that's probably going to end up in some conservative ad campaign, isn't it? Line journalist makes disgusting reference to former conservative leader. No, the guy, he's Andrew Scheer. Whenever things are getting tense in the House, don't look at how Poilievre's reacting because he's an attack dog. Look at Andrew Scheer. That's the tell of how the conservatives feel about that day.
So
So
what do we just want to do a little blurb on this sort of situation, but like what's our takeaway here?
I don't know.
We've just like wasted like 30 minutes talking about this.
Do you want to write this one? Like, do you want to pluck something together out of this?
Yeah, I guess I could. I need to think about what my top line in all of this is, because I mean, like it's not a nothing story. It is useful and indicative that that this is the Jordan Peterson Shapiro pool of YouTube listeners is where they think their growth audience is. I think that is a worthwhile story. I'm not going to say that this is a non-story because like it's interesting. Do I think it's going to be and okay, is it also indicative of like of an attrition like approach from the liberals? They're going to just continue to drop these little hints that slowly pick away at Poilievre's reputation by attrition. Yeah, I think that's also true. Do I think that is getting to be a really old tactic by the liberals? Yeah, I'm pretty bored with it, to be honest with you.
It keeps working.
But it keeps working, so I understand why they keep doing it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to sort of pick away at there. It's interesting.
I'll tell you what. Why don't you do the main one on Alberta and pull like we got like 5 or 6 threads in that one, so you can pull a bit of a medley out of that one.
Okay.
All right. So this one's fun because we have 3 overlapping topics that are all separate.
Then we got to talk about ArriveCAN too, because that was an interesting one.
Was that this week or was that last week?
That was this week.
Was it?
Pretty sure.
I
don't know. Every day is blurry to me. I was traveling all week.
I think, if I remember correctly, I snuck ArriveCAN into the Dispatch last week because it broke Friday night. I think it was a Friday night news dump, and I think we've covered that already.
Okay, never mind then. Ignore me.
I would never ignore you. I'll just gently correct you on that one.
That's mansplaining.
Hey, look, if I'm getting in trouble with the conservatives already, I'm just going to basically lean into all this here. But now I'm doubting myself, so I am literally pulling up our Dispatch right now. Let's see. Did I do ArriveCAN?
Anything that happened last week, I'm kind of blanking
on. I don't know. I'll check. Green Party. Yes, we did cover it last week.
All right, never mind.
Yep. All right, so that's covered.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. What a scintillating
I completely forgot it.
What a scintillating segment of the podcast that's going to be. So a couple of interesting ones that are all kind of in a general range here of each other. Several Western provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, have signaled to the federal government that they're not going to comply with the federal so-called military-style assault rifles ban. Particularly what they're going to do is that they will deny access to provincial resources to enforce or enact the ban in any way. And that will mean the RCMP detachments in those 3 provinces, which don't have provincial police forces. So Marco Mendicino, who's the public safety minister and who's the Liberal point man on this, he said that this is a stunt, that it was Alberta first and then Saskatchewan and Manitoba joined. He went on the national talk shows and he dismissed this as a stunt. And he said gun control is 100% within the federal jurisdiction and provincial efforts to impede it are a stunt. And here's the thing. First of all, Marco Mendicino is right. Gun control is 100% in federal jurisdiction, and any attempts to impede it by the provinces are a stunt. But here's the thing. Stunt meets stunt, Marco. Because most of what the Liberals have been proposing on gun control since 2019 is a stunt. This is like pot calling kettle black territory here. Marco Mendicino has absolutely no legs to stand on accusing anybody else of doing a stunt on anything related to gun control. And
I would also like to take some credit for saying stunt meets stunt, because I feel like I introduced that particular phrase into our conversation earlier.
Did you? All right. Well, yeah, credit.
But it's good.
But it's granted.
Good. I'm sure I steal from you all the time. So
I will throw together a bit of a blurb on this, and I won't belabor the point. What I'll probably do is just link to some of what I've written on this issue before. But I have written for the line at length before about how the Liberals in around 2019 took themselves out of what until then had been a shared consensus on gun control in Canada. The Conservatives leaned a little one way, the Liberals leaned a little the other way, but there actually was a shared consensus of what the purpose of the gun control system was, what the goals of the program were, how you went about them. And it was the Liberals, after they lost their majority, who said, well, the hell with this. We're going hard on guns as a wedge issue, particularly with suburban moms. Because I've talked to like a bunch of pollsters about this. Guns scare the shit out of women in the 905.
Women in the 905 rule the world, man.
Well, they at the very least keep the Liberals in power. And like the fact that like a lot of what the Liberals have been proposing for years, as I have written about repeatedly, is bullshit. It is a symbolic stunt aimed at appeasing those core, largely but not exclusively female voters, largely but not exclusively in suburban areas.
Canada's Karens don't like guns.
Bingo. And so if Marco Mendicino here is going to get up on his high horse and lament the fact that the provinces are stunting on guns, well, you're just getting it back, bud. Like this is like I kind of liked it the old way when the Liberals and the Conservatives basically agreed and they made modest policy tweaks and recommendations, some of which I didn't agree with, but they were within an established framework.
Well, I'm actually going to know. I'm going to actually make this point also as well, and that is one of the things that happened after Shandro came out and said we're not going to actually direct provincial police resources to enforcing this federal law. Is that one of the people who took total credit for it was Danielle Smith. She was like, haha, you are calling my Sovereignty Act stupid, but you're doing exactly that same thing. So she took it on the stump and used it as an example of the provincial government doing what she'd claimed she'd forwarded all along. Okay, so a couple of points on that one. One is, okay, so wait a minute, you're saying that the provincial government is able to pull back resources on this particular directive without the use of a Sovereignty Act?
Yeah.
Then why are we passing a Sovereignty Act?
Because it's a stunt.
And secondly, it's a stunt. We know perfectly well the federal government can pursue this in court, and they'll probably win because this does fall under federal jurisdiction. And if you want to pass a Sovereignty Act that you're claiming is constitutional because it will respect and reinforce the traditional boundaries between provincial and federal jurisdiction, guess what? Where do you think this is going to go? Secondly, there is actually one area where the provinces do have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of the gray area between provincial and federal jurisdiction, and that is on matters of policing. And that's because, of course, policing is a provincial jurisdiction. So it is possible for the provinces to say, we're just not going to direct resources to this particular issue. For example, like BC did with pot dispensaries.
Yep.
Just said, yeah, we get that it's still against the law to have a pot dispensary. We're just not going to enforce it. So there's ample precedent for this.
Oh, yeah.
And whether or not the feds choose to enforce it or not is always an interesting question. But it is worth noting that the fact that Shandro engaged in this stunt legitimized or gave the appearance of the claim of legitimacy to Smith's Sovereignty Act. So I think that's an interesting thing to note as well.
You know, I've written a series of columns about this, and I know I've talked with you about this before. I've warned that our politics is becoming memeified.
Yes.
And you could also, like, it's a made up word, right? But like all of politics being fought over increasingly narrow slices of the persuadable vote using largely symbolic, high emotion, low IQ politics here.
Yeah.
The stuntification of our politics is a different way of saying the exact same thing. Liberals are stunting on guns for a federal audience. Provinces are stunting on guns for a provincial audience. It's not going to save a single life. Not going to avert a single, like, it's not going to accomplish a goddamn thing, but it will probably keep political fundraising machines running with fresh material. It's probably going to get some votes. The thing I would end with as well, you talked about BC and pot dispensaries in Toronto a couple of years ago, because the city of Toronto is so dysfunctional, it can't figure out how to legalize having a beer at a park. They basically ordered bylaw and police to stop enforcing that. People like you and I will always warn that the rule of law matters. Like, if we're going to have laws, they have to make sense and be enforceable. And if we can't, then we should repeal the laws. Because this is a perfect example of all the progressives in the world who probably thought it was like really smart that BC stopped enforcing dispensaries and that Toronto stopped enforcing alcohol are going to be shocked and appalled when Alberta refuses to go pick up a bunch of AR-15s.
Yep.
It's the same goddamn thing, guys. It's just
Yep.
coming at you from a different direction here. Let's have some rules and laws and adhere to them. But I guess I'm just old fashioned that way.
You
Speaking,
old fashioned man. Also, Mendicino, another thing
well,
that came up,
yeah,
the
a,
backdating stuff.
a double hit of Mendicino. So I've got to
Mendicino or
go.
Mendicino? Am I saying?
Who
I'm
knows?
sorry.
He'll be gone soon.
We're print people. We can't speak.
Can't speak a damn thing. I think it's Mendicino, but I'm honestly not sure.
Mendicino? Okay.
So
Cappuccino?
I could use one.
That's all I think about when I think his name.
Backdating. I think it was Blacklock's reporter who had this first, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
There had been. I want to be careful with my remarks on the podcast and the video because I'm going to have to research this and write it properly. I don't want to wing it here because it's the timeline is complicated here, but it looks like government lawyers from public safety misled a judge and then doctored documents to back that up. And it seems to have been, I don't want to call it a white lie because I don't want to sound like I'm condoning this, but it was a pretty minor issue. It was like, well, before we proceed with the motion, we have to make sure that this is already in place. And the lawyers are like, yeah, yeah, you bet, Your Honor, that's in place. And then quickly we're like, somebody get me an email. So they came up with a statement to backdate it to show it. This is not like burglarizing the Watergate level stuff here, but it's not good. And I have already written about Mendicino that this is a guy who's a bullshitter on the Emergencies Act, on guns, and now on the dates of documents. And the best part of it is they backdated it to April 31st. There are 30 days in April.
They didn't even backdate it. Well, okay, that's great.
They backdated it to a day that does not exist.
So you're a bullshitter and you're dumb about it. Great.
So, like, this is not the sort of thing a minister or whatever direct them to do. I get it. This is probably, like you said before with Polyev, like some 21-year-old juiced up on Red Bull, like doing it for the lulz. But this is the sort of thing where I don't think it's Mendicino's fault, but the buck stops with him. Remember when Trudeau talked about a return to cabinet government and he was going to make his ministers responsible, which was obviously a crock of shit. But this is a classic example. I do not have faith in the public safety minister's willingness and or ability to be honest with the Canadian people. So I will go write that in a more careful way, and I will keep it very close to the known facts.
Okay.
But I heard whispers about a month or two ago that Mendicino is not in favor currently, even among his bosses here. I was surprised when we had that little mini cabinet shuffle at the end of the summer for one of the ministers had some health problems. I was a little bit surprised he didn't get shuffled out because, as one of my political operative friends said to me, Mendicino's committing the most cardinal sin in the liberal Bible. He's losing. He's and this is the last one, part of in that general theme. I need to go pull all the dates for this. I've got like 5 columns I can go cite here. Canadian federal government has announced a program to replace the 9mm pistol sidearms used by the Canadian Armed Forces.
I read this and I was just like, oh, please tell me what to think about this, Matt Gurney. Is everything about this is so perfect for you. Only you can write about this.
Here's the thing, okay?
Here's the thing.
Okay.
Here's the thing, okay?
Many years ago. Many years ago.
Many years.
The British government and the Canadian government, within a few months of each other, simultaneously decided to replace their 9mm military sidearms. They both came up with a program very similar. They needed the same kind of equipment, roughly the same number of firearms. The British military is somewhat bigger, but within the ballpark here. The British basically stood up a procurement program, selected a vendor, chose the winner, held trials, chose a winner, selected a vendor, issued the paperwork, and had new pistols entering service, I believe, 2 calendar years later. The Canadian federal government has been working on this program in some version for, I think, about 12 years. And we have had to cancel and reboot it a couple of times because our procurement system is completely broken.
Yep.
So Anita Anand, the defense minister, made this announcement today. Thousands of pistols arriving first for the Army and then for the Air Force and Navy as needed
God
later.
bless Anita Anand getting things done.
Again, the thing that just made me laugh is that apparently the pistols will be in Canadian service by next year. This is such an easy procurement. Like, this is
literally pistols. Pistols.
It is something where, like, if you have a license, you can walk into a store and buy one of these things. Like, a lot of military equipment is like bespoke, right? Like, you've got 100 of these things exist in the entire world.
This is not a fucking HIMAR here.
Yeah. Like, you need 20 more of them, so you need to go back to the manufacturer.
You just call up Smith and Wesson and like, can you give me your day's allotment of pistols, please? Yeah.
And like, this is a pretty easy, foolproof technology that's existed for a long time, and the Canadian government couldn't get it done for more than a decade. So I will go and I will pull my old columns on this because all the dates already exist there. But I honestly think the blurb ought to just be timeline of the British procurement, timeline of the Canadian procurement.
And let's give Anita Anand credit because she appears to be the only minister in this government who can actually get a file through.
This will sound snarky, and I don't mean it that way, but I remain baffled by Anita Anand because I don't know if she is hyper competent or if she clears the barest bar of competency.
Yes.
And therefore looks incredible.
Compared to everyone else.
Because the big one she's attributed to is the vaccine procurement, right?
Yes.
But I've never, no one knows because all the documents are classified. So did Anita
now she's developing a track record. Did she's acquired vaccines and now pistols.
So did Anita Anand, by sheer virtue of her brilliance and force of personality, unparalleled across Canadian federal service today, do the impossible by getting the vaccine companies to prioritize Canadian access? Or did Anita Anand show up at a meeting and basically go, we'll pay double if you can get them to us? And they went, okay. I don't know. Like, I don't know. So
there's a source out there in the Ottawa government who can give us some insight into how competent Anita Anand is. That would actually be very helpful to us.
And when it comes to the pistols as well, right? Like, Anita, like, on the one hand, I want to put Anita Anand on my shoulders and run around like the city screaming her name and throwing confetti in the air. I want to get 30 of my best friends together and dump a big thing of Gatorade on her because she finally got the pistols for the Canadian Army. This is incredible. This is like hitting a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth inning in the World Series. Or was it
you just showed up and made a phone call and like you got the pistols? Well done.
So if you ever need a refresher on the questionable efficacy and efficiency of our Canadian federal government,
12 years for pistols.
12 years for pistols.
I'm going to make one quick note to end us off with, and my battery's going to die on my computer. So I'm going to be super, super quick. It's going to be a forced hard out here. I was traveling much of this week, and I was in Ottawa waiting for my plane yesterday, so Thursday. And I saw something, Matt. I saw something pretty amazing. I saw someone reading Andrew Potter's Peace in the Line on his phone out in the wild. And I like got really creepy about it. I was like, so I like took a little spot like kitty corner to him, and I think his friend kind of recognized me but didn't come up with me. And so I kind of like stood behind him and started taking pictures of him and like sending the pictures to everybody I knew. Like, this dude's reading Potter. He's reading the line. Yeah, it was a very exciting moment. It's a very cool thing when you see someone in the wild reading something that you've written. It's a very, very cool experience. And it's the first time that I've ever seen anyone reading the line in the wild. So really I'm going to make a proposal. I think we should put in the dispatch of this story. And if the person who was reading the line in the wild can tell us what time he was there and which restaurant he was at, then we should give him a year's free subscription. What do you think?
Write it up. We'll put it at the top of we'll put it at the very top of the dispatch right
Put
after
this-
the intro remarks.
Also, that's also going to be an apology for
Being
creeping
creepy.
over his shoulder and taking pictures of him and giving those pictures to my mother.
Well, we print people have a lot more anonymity than people who are. You and I both do TV, but like we're not on it every day. So I get often the experience, and I'm sure you have some version of this, is when you're out somewhere, you're at a store, you're at a restaurant, and someone's looking at you not with recognition, but with near recognition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and they're like, and then they're like, they kind of want to come up and say hi, but then they're like, no, that's creepy.
And they can't quite place.
They can't quite do it.
Yeah, I did get complete. Okay, I've had a few weird experiences like that. Once was a guy driving by me in his car, leaning out his window and going, "Man, I subscribed to the line." and
Amazing.
For a second there, I thought I was about to get shot in a drive-by shooting because window comes down, guy leans out. I'm like, well, okay, this is a weird way to go. The only time I have ever had an outright awkward encounter, well, I guess there was two of them, but this is the one that was most. I'm at a bar, I'm in the men's room, I'm at a urinal, and this guy saddles up next to me, and we're both like holding our penises, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, are you Matt Gurney?" Like, yeah. And he goes, "I read your column," and I'm like, "Well, you'll forgive me if I don't shake your hand, but like thanks for reading." Anyway, yeah, these things do happen.
Should you like cross the streams just as a show of camaraderie or something?
Well, that is how men bond.
Yeah, I mean,
as I'm sure you know.
Yeah,
you've heard the rumors. A good stream crossing, you're not really friends. Okay, that is genuinely really cool though. So write that up in a couple sentences. Let's stick that right at the top of the next dispatch.
Okay, all right.
This has been a long podcast already, but we covered a lot of ground today.
And my battery is, I got the red BP battery thing, so we got to say goodbye.
Okay, well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Talk to you on Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.